Hey, welcome to the Runaways podcast. My name is Cody. I am here with Dan and also Noah. Hey, Dan,
Hey,
it looks like your plant's dying in the background there. We were
yeah, I
just
learned
talking
today
about
it
this
needs
beforehand.
frequent water instead of once a month water, so I'm gonna do better going forward.
Okay.
But now it's
Uh,
more appropriate for my office, so
it is not
maybe
as
I'm
big
doing this correctly.
or floofy.
Yeah.
Um, but today we are going to be talking about MST, kind of our first impressions, because we've, got to play a little bit of it. Talishar guys are killing it with how quickly they're getting everything in there.
Yep.
So
February
can't
too.
Yep, February as well. Can't express our gratitude to them enough. And Noah, you and I have been brewing decks together since this has
Mhm.
started. Been pretty active. How are you liking, I guess I would say, your initial impressions of MST or your going into your this week in general?
Yeah, I would say I've been focusing on new the most. It's just the hero that is the most interesting from my perspective of like every game just can go so wildly different when you're playing your opponent's cards. So yeah, I've been up to like 3:30, 4 a.m. the past 2 nights, just like staring at all the new cards, playing some games on Talishar and making infinite mistakes while I'm like trying to finagle the super long chain link. So it's been super fun to mess around with so far.
Yep, I think we're all in the same in agreement. I mean, we're in deep now for nationals testing, right? We got literally like a month, and then we'll be sitting in nationals, drafting, and we still don't have the full set. I think we're still missing a pile of cards. We are recording this on Tuesday. I thought I thought LSS was supposed to get the set out to us already for the people who are going to be in Japan and have to know all the card text in Japanese when they're drafting. So maybe that's coming out tonight or tomorrow or something. But hopefully they get it out to them in time because they're going to have to study it. I can't imagine trying to draft the set in Japanese this weekend.
Yeah. There's a lot of nuances of like if you've played a blue card versus pitched a blue card that may slip people's mind.
Is day two draft? Or is it just top eight?
I thought day 2 was draft.
Oh yeah.
But
No, that's tough.
all Japanese packs.
Yep.
So we'll find out how that goes. I know we'll be watching it. We do have, a couple people there in Japan will be playing, so that'll be great. But okay, let's talk about MST. That's what everyone cares about. You can see it all over Twitter. You can see it wherever you go. People are talking about MST for obvious reasons, right? Just some initial impressions after we have most of the set spoiled. Dan, what are kind of your initial thoughts looking into MST?
Yeah, I mean, like overall, I feel like this is Uprising 2.0. Like you have these three super cool heroes that are very different in the way they play and like appealing to different people. I feel like so I kind of feel like it's going to be a banger in that regard. Like people will want to be playing these new heroes. The talented heroes tend to be pretty successful, but I don't know. It's cool stuff. Like it's a new problem to solve, right? Like blue cards are good now if you're trying to transcend, and blue cards are actually bad. It turns out. So trying to make them good is a fun exercise, you could say. Yeah, I don't know. It's I wish we had more time. The turnaround before Nats makes me want to just not even look at any of these heroes because it's not that simple. Like it's not just like here's your value. Like some of these Majestics are super pushed, right? Like I think most of the Majestics in the set, like, yeah, these are good cards. But like to use your hero ability, you have to be playing a bunch of blues and you want to be casting like 2 blues in a turn. And like I don't know if it's worth the time to figure that out right now. But I would like to.
Yeah, I think even the rares too. You mentioned the Majestics being pushed, but you can just look at some of the rares compared to the commons, and like a lot of the rares are, especially for the generics like Assassin, Ninja, and Illusionist. All three, I think, have cards that could slot into the older heroes, just because of their power levels. So, not only focusing on the new heroes themselves, but also what the just solo class cards have implications for the old heroes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the set's interesting. We're playing off like a different access where like blues matter. We've done like reds matter before. We have touched a little. We've done yellow matters for like Prism, and a little bit for like Kasai has been yellow, like find the best yellows type of deal. This is like one of the first times we've ever done like your blues really matter. more than just like pitching or being efficient in case you have to play them. Now it's like you're actively choosing to try and play blues in order to get an advantage. It does make the math weird when you're playing like new in certain decks where you're playing this card that's terrible, like you're just playing this blue card that's terrible, and then you're playing like a card to get a chi to do a thing, and like the math on this interaction is like 2. But like sometimes the effect that you get to do because you have the chi is just like makes up for all of that. So that's been pretty interesting to deal with. I think overall the set's going to probably be extremely popular. I think the art is great. I think it has a lot of classes that people like, probably with the exception of Zen. I know some people are excited about him, but they don't really typically have as big of a following as the other two. But talking about Zen, we have been playing, a little bit of Zen. What are your first kind of thoughts or impressions on Zen as a whole, as a deck? Tell me right now, is it going to win Nationals?
Right now? No.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, 0 chance.
Oh, maybe. Okay, I'm upset. 50%.
Actually, 0 chance. Yeah. No. I really don't see the vision of Zen. It's like you really have to think about how he could be better than Katsu, because their hero powers are much similar. But like Zen's hero power, like we've been talking about the whole time, requires you to play some quote unquote bad card to get it started, and you have to add more cards that don't block in a deck. That's not only needing to block to deny hit triggers to be able to have some sort of semblance of a turn, but also wants to play cards like Art of War and other cards that extend your chain. So having these cards that are not attacks and also don't block can be like a bit dubious. So I think, yeah, at least from what I've seen of Zen so far, there would have to be like a drastic change if he had a hope of even like top 8ing Nationals in the US at least.
I do think all of these Tiger cards are pretty strong, though. Like I think Tiger in general might be a real factor, whether it's Katsu or Zen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I just wanted to point out that I've noticed kind of scrolling through the cards compared to the basically like every set we've had so far is there's no class with just like one big tall attack. Like if you look at basically like every draft set we've had in the past, there's always been like some, whether they're like the hybrid cards or like class specific cards, there's like a class that just wants to like do one super tall attack, whereas I feel like it's not really a factor at play in this set.
Yeah. I'll say Zen's kind of boring in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Just like, yeah, throwing the tigers can be fun. And when he does this thing, it's like extremely annoying to play against. Chasing the tail is just like a very frustrating card to have to deal with. The value on that card is ridiculous. It's just like a 1 for 7 essentially, because if you've attacked with a tiger, then you play this for a 1 for 4, and then the next tiger is 3 attack. So that does lead him to like pretty good like 3 card hands. So like if he blocks and then he pulls it out, it's pretty annoying. He just kind of feels like Fi mixed with Katsu to me. He can have some crazy turns, and if he does his thing, like his damage output can be really good. He does make up for the fact that he has to play blues pretty easily because of his transcend ability. When you actually do that, since you're going to exchange, you're playing a blue to be able to pitch a chi, but then you're exchanging that chi for your combo card, and then also a crouching tiger, which kind of makes up for the fact that you played an underpowered blue to begin with. To be able to transform into the chi. So I don't think Zen's bad by any means. I think the deck is actually in like certain formats and against certain opponents like pretty good. And as far as like in the set by itself, I think it's a very good counter to some of the other decks that the 2 other heroes. I think he plays pretty well into those 2 heroes, into the point where sometimes he feels a little unfair into them. But as like a wide open in the metagame, like it's just Fi Ninja Zen stuff. So unless like one of these new cards that we are missing changes something, or there's like maybe some like really advanced line that we haven't seen yet, it's very possible that there's like some combination of other combo cards that are outside the Tiger scope that really can push this deck into like a new spot. Overall, I think it's a good aggro go wide deck, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the other problems too that I see just with the Tiger cards in general is like most of them combo off of Crouching Tiger. It's like if you draw two cards that combo off of Crouching Tiger, you have to like have made two Tigers, which can sometimes be a decent amount to ask. If you're not on a turn where you're buffing your whole chain, maybe the second Tiger is coming in for 0, so it like ruins potential like mask plays. So yeah, I just feel like the way that they've structured the combo with Crouching Tiger is kind of significantly weaker than the other combos if you're not doing like the Anthem style effect of buffing your whole chain.
Yeah, it feels like they kind of had to do that because like his Art of War turns are sometimes just crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they lowered the floor and raised the ceiling.
Yeah, like it's but it feels to me like an Art of War deck for the most part. Like I was playing against it earlier today, and it was just like everything's fine. We're going back and forth fine. They had an Art of War turn. They dealt 20 damage, like through blocking with 3 cards, and it's like, okay, like you got me. And then sometimes they play Art of War, and it's just +3, like +4. It's like not even that big of a deal. And their attacks are coming in lower. A lot of their good attacks cost 1. That's like the part that's really hard for me to brew the deck. Is like I want to play all of these like 1-for-4s that like are actually like 1-for-5s or more, but like it's like asking you to have 2 blues in every hand, like for like pitch wise, and it feels difficult sometimes.
I think they wanted you to use the new legendary chess piece to like somehow offset that, but you can't like reasonably transcend every turn and still have powerful turns.
Yeah. I've also found his late game is like pretty abysmal. Obviously if you get to like a point where you have flip chi, by the time you get like, then your turns can be pretty strong. But I found like his late game, when he has to block, the deck gets significantly worse. As soon as he has to give up like 2 cards, a lot of the times the turn isn't very good. It's not like Fi, where Fi has like a great play pattern at that. Now he can if certain hands line up, but now you're like, it's really dubious to how your hand looks. And Fi can just do that pattern every time, no matter what, almost. So like Fi's late game's a lot more consistent, I think, than Zen's late game is.
I think it can be built to be similar though, no? Like the 2-card Fi plays is 7 damage, right? So if you're just playing a good amount of like 1-for-5s in the deck.
It can be. It depends how many blues you have to run as starters, and then you're getting those at, other parts of the game, and then your math is like really bad because you have, these blue attacks you need to play as like your chain starter. But I don't know. We'll see. Obviously it's very early. I think the deck has decent power. Like you can definitely take this deck and win stuff with it. I'm curious just to see what happens when you open the deck up to like a wider meta. Like the KOs and the victors and everything else. Like, how's it really going to play into those things? Also, if it ever becomes too popular, there's like a ton of hate cards for this deck. Like the gloves they printed and Echo, which is, which I think they might have talked about in like an article or something. I saw some talk about that, especially on Twitter. But it's like the amulet, the Echo amulet item that you put into play is like a good counter at any time they play like those. Amnesia is good. Like any of the normal stuff against Ninja, he just like also gets railed by, which makes those like way more valuable. So, because if you already have to deal with like Katsu, if we ever find out what this Fi card is, it's supposed to be really good if it actually exists. And then you also have Zen. It's like makes it more reasonable to like Amnesia in the sideboard. Pretty good. Anything else on Zen before we move to the next hero?
Yeah, just one thing that's kind of cool, how they like revisited the Zen state mechanic. I like that. It's just like a insanely powerful card that didn't really get much love beforehand. So I think it's cool that they like made a pretty easily accessible way to do that.
I think the hero power, putting the Tiger in hand, can be a big deal too. For like Art of War spike turns or against Fleshbag. Like your opponents just like can't Fleshbag now unless they want a 50-50, like very little value.
Agreed. We'll see how that deck evolves. But I think, to me personally, it's the least exciting of the 3. And I think a lot of people probably feel that way. It's a little of straightforward, and a lot of the cards we are getting are like cards we already had for the most part. Okay, let's talk about new. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter talking about new. We've been testing new, of course, because it was kind of like the first cards that we had that were like programmed in Talishar. So if you like go to the other section in Talishar, you just see like new being played. But no, I know you've been working a little bit on new. What are your first impressions of this deck?
Yeah. So my first impression is a lot of the cards don't often do what they think they would do. So it's definitely strong when you have, for example, like your Art of Desire, that cycle of the body, soul, and mind, where in theory, you attack. If your opponent were to block it, you would banish the card off new ability, gain a life, draw a card. So then they can't block it, but then they don't block it. You banish their top card, you gain a life, draw a card. But in reality, it's a lot of decks are playing a mix between reds, yellows, and blues now. So your cards aren't as reliable to hit, similar with the other ones that Bonds of Attraction and Bonds of Memory that care about top deck and graveyard. So I think like if you look at her cards from like a 10,000 foot view of, okay, this is what the card says it does. It doesn't always do what it says it does, which makes the games interesting. But definitely, it's going to be one of her challenges is ensuring that she actually gets value out of these hit triggers and the banishes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think she's interesting because she wants to play her blue cards like a lot to be able to use her ability and do other things. But blue attacks suck like a lot. And Assassin's blue cards are like really bad. They're like probably some of the worst blues in the entire game is like in the Assassin class. And so like, are you playing like blue attacks and like red pumps? Like that's like one way to look at it. You could look at like blue pumps and red attacks. It's like another way you could try and play the deck, but like the blue pumps really are like really bad. All the numbers are just like garbage. Actually like math wise, but when they come together, they can do, more than some of their parts, obviously. It's been extremely fun to play new. I think new is an incredibly fun deck to play. I'm a little concerned about just heavily polarized matchups for the deck though. We've been playing some games where like, if you're playing against an opponent who's has like blue cards that you can steal that are like really premium, like KO, for example, like the deck just feels incredible. And then like you go and you start playing against Kasai, and then you're just like, this deck doesn't do anything. Like it literally, like I'm not even playing the game on my side of the field. Like the deck doesn't do anything.
Yeah, especially with the blue attacks being 1 power when they have dynamos, it's just like they don't have to fear at all.
And so I think this deck is kind of like complicated to build.
Yeah,
I think I would say there's like a lot of innovation probably to do in the build for new, and maybe even like a semi-transformative sideboard where you're like switching in a bunch of like the blue matter cards only in the matchups where their blues matter. It's like another idea been floating around, but I think it was well designed.
I think it's like also a huge flavor win too if you think about the play pattern that you were just describing of maybe having a transformative sideboard where you're like an assassin, so you have to like study your target, right? So you have to like adapt your game plan to the different matchup that you're going to be playing against. You can't have like the same path to assassination.
Yeah,
just like
that's pretty cool as well. Dan, what are your thoughts on new?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. I was also going to say that like it's so much fun to play this deck against some matchups. Like some matchups, like this is so cool. I'm playing all your cards. Here's 20 damage from your advantage pile, and then like matchups, it's like, what am I doing with my life? I like having to solve that problem, right? And figure out an alternative strategy.
Yeah, I had a crazy match against Vincent earlier where I was like, they had a blue Mauve Skies and a blue Envelop in Darkness banished and a Widespread Annihilation engrave. So I was able to like loop the Widespread Annihilation twice by playing the card that like banishes it out of their graveyard and using my dagger. It was like pretty gross. So yeah, you can definitely do some like pretty things you would never imagine going into a tournament that would be game states just somehow pop up.
It does feel like you need to be like very calculated with this deck though.
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
You can't just be like, here's my number value. It's like, no, you need to like you said, have your plan and like know these like crazy combos that you could potentially roll into.
Yeah, all your numbers are so trash. If you like mess up the sequence and make them even worse, then you're mostly gonna lose.
Yeah, deck is difficult to play, for one thing. And sequencing is super important on your pop-off turns. The part that's weird is like the thing you're doing against some of these decks is incredibly powerful. It's like way higher, like more powerful than we've seen other decks do. The match is still close, and that's a little worrisome to me.
Yeah.
Like when we've had giant pop-off turns where I'm just like stealing all their blues, and I'm like, here's 30 damage. I did 30. I put 30 damage on the table, and then I look over and it's like, oh, we're even again. Like, I caught back up from all that damage that I took this game because I've been sending blue attacks at you all day. And so like it kind of needs that, but it feels very game plan focused, and that's what I like about the deck. Is like you're sitting down, you're trying to do your thing, and you're trying to craft the whole game to get to your point where you can do your thing. And so the deck feels very intentional, and I think that's kind of enjoyable to play. I'm not going to look forward to playing against New because they have a bunch of cards that try and make your opponent not be able to play the game. So we'll see how that draws out.
Yeah.
But like, I don't like their helmet. Like, I don't like discard effects. I've never liked discard effects in card games. Now it is fun to do. I'm not going to say that. Like, it's fun when you're like ripping the cards out of your opponent's hand, but like, I've always hated, having discard played against me. And
so I don't know. I think this discard is very different than most, where given that it's usually face up when they're going to be able to do it, because they're going to have to like cast a blue card. If your opponent like casts a blue card that turn and keeps 1 to 2 cards in hand, I think it's like pretty face up that they're probably going to go for this. So you can consider how you want to block, and then also you get the choice of what card you want to banish from your hand. It's not like a random banish. If it was random banish, it would be like much more annoying to play against. But I think the fact that it's you get to choose and it's sort of face up makes it somewhat okay. And it's also blade break, so it's not like a temper equipment where you also get the block value out of it and you get to apply pressure with it.
True. I will say their new blue stealth cards though, that also like rip cards out of your hand is annoying, and then they like combine it with the helmet. But to be fair, like they do all that. Like they do this like crazy play, rip cards out of your hand, and then they dealt like 5 damage.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they did like a 4-card 5 damage. Yeah.
Yeah. But they ripped like 2 cards out of your hand, and they gained like a health or something. You're just like, okay.
Yeah.
So pretty weird. But I think overall, great design, has some impressive power level to look at. Very, in my opinion, very hard to build this deck. This is a very hard to build deck. And so I would not be surprised if some people take it to nationals and do well with it. If they get some good matchups or if they figure out something with this deck. It does feel like it's, there might be something solvable there. It's also probably pretty hard to play against. But unlike Azuri, when you get punished by misplaying against Azuri, you lose something and you take up like some chunks of damage. This feels like I lose something, but like it didn't really deal that much damage to me. Unless it's doing its big pop-off turn, right? So that might balance it out a little bit. Any other thoughts on New?
As we had more time.
Yeah, and I think the not having a lot of time is, while it's bad, it's also kind of good, because I think people will be trying to figure out how their deck works and what blue cards they want to run as like their blue base for whatever hero they choose to play, and probably won't have enough time to be super specific about not including certain blues because they could get stolen. So I think like at Nats there'll probably be some pretty exciting plays where people are stealing blues that if the player registering the non-new deck was thinking about new as a factor more, maybe they wouldn't have included, but they just didn't have time to like fully optimize their blue base in regards to new.
My favorite thing is to play their utility blues. Like when I get to play like my opponents, like you said, they had like a blue Mauve Skies. I would love that. Like I get to play your Mauve Skies. Like that stuff. I love playing all of my opponent's utility cards. That
yeah, it was crazy. It's like Mauve Skies and Envelop. Like I made a rune chant, dude. That's crazy.
That's great. I don't know. I'm very impressed with the design for new. I think they did a good job so far. Okay, next is Enigma. Haven't got as much time to play this because most of the coding wasn't in yet, but have messed around with it a little bit. But it looks like it's probably playable now. What are some of your first impressions of the Enigma deck?
So I've only played it in like the Blitz decks. I haven't played Constructed yet, but it's very enjoyable to play, is what I'm finding. Like you have these all these options every turn. Like if I want to play my auras defensively to protect these other auras, do I want to like not protect anything and reset the board? Yeah, I don't know. It seems like the pieces are there. I could definitely see this being a real deck. I could also see it just not have enough to pass like the KO damage check, right? And that might just push it out of the meta. Like if you can't keep any of your auras around because the aggro decks of the format are too aggressive, then I don't see how there's room for this.
Yeah, I think she has like some crazy power cards, which, I mean, the both Zen and New have power cards to some extent, but like the 10,000 something, what is that card called? The like 10,000 years of 10,000 year reunion, yeah. Like that card is just insane that it exists. The Restless Cold, like all of her M's are just like crazy game-winning cards if those cards are able to table. Whereas the other heroes don't have that. So I think that like that play pattern is super enticing to try to make work. But yeah, she's truly living up to her name. I still have like no real conception in my head of like, okay, here's like a standard like 40 cards that you play in every Enigma deck, and then here's like the tech cards based on the variants. I don't think that that's been like solidified yet.
Yeah, I think the deck is it's checking a lot of boxes as value wise of like how I want to play the game. And having I like a lot of the cards. I am concerned, like you said, Dan, that maybe it just can't get past KO damage, like might run over too many of its wards. I also feels a little like sometimes it gets the prism problem where you just like draw things in the wrong order. Is something I'm worried about. Maybe that can be smoothed out a little bit, but like there are hands and times where you like draw your hand and you're like, if I could transcend and use my boots, I could just put my whole hand on the table. And like, that's crazy. Like, that's just like, you're like, you look at them, I'll take 15, put whole hand on table. Like, let's go. Like that's like old Prism stuff that you used to do where the whole goal of the game was like go to 1, but have a whole board and then just play the game from there. And she can sometimes do those type of things because of her boots. Her boots are like crazy good for that and for like resetting up your board. Or if your opponent like breaks your whole board, but they can't really hit you, then you just get to put your whole hand on the table again. And you can get people into those type of patterns and then like slowly, you did that, but you ended up with like 1 ward the next time and you incrementally like get a bigger and bigger board. I think a lot of that is interesting to me. Again, this is another deck that feels like how you build it and with like certain game plans is like incredibly important. And with Illusionists, it's usually pretty hard to do well with an Illusionist right off the bat, like right when it comes out, because the game plans are usually have a lot of like minutia into how you actually win the game. I know Fino and I used to talk about this a lot with like Prism, where it was just like 1 wrong block had a cascading effect of how many auras you could get out like 4 turns later. And then because you couldn't double aura that on that 4th turn, like you should have been able to if you blocked differently or if you saved an aura differently, then you lost the game. But if you had double aura on that turn, you probably won the game. And like, it's pretty hard to get like super minute, like good at a deck when you have a month to build it, test it, and then also be like an expert at it. And Illusionist typically requires that level of expertise in order to actually get all of the value out of the deck. So a big concern for too, Nationals. Right? And the meta's new, yeah. So a ton of people are clamoring to play Enigma. I think that's been the most posts I've seen on like Twitter or anything talking about I'm playing Enigma. Than any of the other hero, but like I wish we had more time, right? Because I would also love to be in that camp of like I'm just gonna play Enigma.
Well, I do love that we do have more time, right? Like we get to play a whole national season and then run it back, right? At Pro Tour with the same set. I'm pretty into that.
Yeah. I think that'll be interesting for people going to US Nats. Like we'll be the first, but then we also get to play it when it's established. Yep. And so it will feel like 2 different metas, I think. So that'll be pretty nice. It's tough when you got a month and you're just like, well, we got to lock in decks next week, guys. We got That came out 1 week from now. We need to lock in what deck you're playing so that you can get good.
Yep. Not my card locking this weekend. Or remaining on my current lock.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. But I don't know. I'm excited to start cracking into Enigma, and I know a lot of people are as well. I'm just hoping there's something there that's good, that's playable. I'm just a little concerned it can't handle either weird damage or brute damage.
Yeah, and it's also they've given many classes now ways of juicing all your cards with unpreventable stuff. So always going to be something you have to be scared about.
I built both my new deck and my Uzuri deck, and I was like, Malign, come play the game with me, please. Just like 3 of them in the sideboard for like just that matchup. Like I'm like, oh, my deck's done.
Yep. Yeah, you got picked to pieces as well as Malign. Yeah.
Yeah. Malign's just like easier because it's like always, right?
Yeah. There's merits to both, and then then you have Azalea too with Murkmire, which is like with the current Azalea plan of just all like red line 0 cost. I mean, that arrow's just fine to play anyway.
Yep. So yeah, I guess I'm excited that now that we have most of the cards and most of them are coded, really dig into testing and see everything about the set, because so far it feels like a good set. It's an exciting set, which is great. I thought Heavy Hitters was a great set. This has been a great set. Several sets before this were not great sets. So it's nice it feels like we turned a corner on the sets that are coming out, and they're exciting and they're fun and the heroes are cool. And I think the story they're telling is cool. I think all aspects seem to be good. Hopefully the draft is also fun. Okay. Anything else on new before we move on? Or not new, but Enigma.
No, I think we're done with most at the time of this recording, right? There's not going to be any new cards for Enigma that could drastically change anything.
That whatever that Mystic Legendary is, right?
So yeah, there could still be some missing piece that we're not seeing, like with how the shoes kind of shook up how you could play the deck. So there could still be something new, but yeah, as of now, it's still just trying to work it out.
Yep. Cool. Well, let's move on to our Discord questions. These questions are asked by members of our premium Discord. If you would like to be able to ask questions on the podcast or view any of our videos that come out every month that are only for members of the Discord, or ask questions of the people on the team, or find people who are also trying to get better at the game or maybe going to nationals and test with, feel free to join the Discord below. But the first question is going to come from Andre, and it says, of all of the cards in MST, what seems to be the biggest sleeper and the biggest trap card? So what card seems people think is bad but it's probably good? And then what card do people think is good is probably bad?
I think Stir the Pot for both.
Stir the Pot. Dude, Stir the Pot's really good.
I think so. I really think it is, but I think it's a trap like how good I think it is.
Yes, it's terrible. Sense. Yes, I'm in the camp of saying it's terrible. You can be in the camp of saying it's good.
It depends on when you draw it. If you draw it after if you've like transformed 3 of them, and then you draw that as like your 4th transform card, you're like, yes, second cycle's already here, baby.
Yeah.
But like if you draw it as like one of your first ones, you're like, this card's terrible.
Yeah.
No, agreed. I think all the Transcend cards are maybe better than I first thought. Like at first I was playing like 3 in all of these decks, and now I'm like, nah, just put all 8. I don't care what they do.
The Go Again one? So good. That was just great. That was just a good card, in my opinion.
Yeah. The Go Again one, and then specifically the one that target banishes a card in new is like also just a good card.
Yeah. I mean, just having like Go Again on a stick for an instant 0, the fact that it transforms is like even better, but like there's been so many times where you're just like attack with a thing and they're like, that's it. And then you're just like,
people play a card called Glint the Quicksilver, and like this is just Glint that draws itself sometimes.
Yep. So I think that was just generally good.
Yeah. I think we've kind of established so far, the worst chi is the drop in the ocean. Just like the most awkward to do because you're typically wanting to play cheese on your own turn and you don't want to be minusing your own attack.
Which we've been doing a lot. That's
yeah.
Or like you have to plus their attack because it's the only one, and you're like having to use a chi on their turn.
Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, I think for me the biggest two traps, we kind of touched on this earlier, is like the blue 0-for-1 Assassin Majestics, Bonds of Agony, and Persuasive Prognosis that are like super, super powerful if they resolve, and it seems like they should be very good, and they're like highly touted as insanely disruptive, but I think they're like a bit of a trap if the opponent has defensive cards. So those are ones I think are like kind of overrated. And then underrated, I think, is a lot of just like the vanilla Mystic cards that are like, if you've transcended or played a blue, I think those are like, in other sets, these are kind of just like draft chaff, but I think some of them are decent enough, at least the ones that like can block 3 and be a blue as their base. I think are actually like decently CC playable.
Yeah, I've been surprisingly unimpressed by like Hiss. Well, I think it's good. I'm not saying it's bad by any means. It's frustrating to play because of the requirement to pitch a blue.
Yep.
I felt like that's a problem. If you're playing blue attacks, it feels hard to play Hiss. It feels a little easier to play Hiss if you're playing red attacks. I really don't like the red. It's not the chakra one, I don't think, but it's the red reaction that if you've transcended is +5 for new.
Yeah, Tide Chakra, yeah.
Tide Chakra. I really don't like the red one. It just doesn't, like, if you're playing it on a red attack, then you probably didn't transcend. And if you're playing it on a blue attack, then it's like you're still paying the 1 and it's just a 6 now. Like it being like a +5 is like not a real thing.
It seems weird that that's the rare, but then like Venomous Bite being much more consistently 4 damage is like the common. I don't know. That's like weird.
Yeah. So I that one feels like a trap. The blue one though, the blue one's good.
Interesting.
Because playing it on a red makes it a 7 if it's a 4, for instance, which feels better to me. Also, if you're attacking already with a higher amount, then daggering beforehand feels better. If you're just daggering for like a 1 cost, it feels pretty bad. And if you can't play the red one on a red attack, using your tunic because you wouldn't have transcended that turn. But you can play the blue one off a tunic and still transcend. So you don't need 4 cards then, you only need 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I think another thing too about people evaluating Hiss is like super, super strong because Assassin is like for a long time kind of wanted Go Again, where you can like leverage the contract mechanic sticking over multiple chains. But I found the problem is like if you're just using Hiss with stealth cards, your cards for the most part are 3 on offense or 3 on defense. So it's like giving one of them Go Again so you can play another one is not like actually doing anything above rate. You could have just blocked 3 with the card as opposed to attacking for 3 with it. So it's like, I think the upside of going like stealth card, Hiss, give it Go Again, stealth card is like pretty marginal and not actually worth that much like numerically.
I agree. All this is done. Every time I play new, I go, I kind of wish I had a real weapon. Just like a real, like, can I have like a 1 for 3? Just like a 1 for 3 weapon, please?
Yeah, like Hiss is a great card, but the issue is like to use it efficiently, you have to attack with this dagger for 1 off of a blue, and now your blue is just 4 damage and a Go Again, which is not that good.
Yeah, or you like, well, another play pattern that comes up is like you attack with a blue, then you transcend, and then like you pitch the chi for your hero power or your hat, and then you tunic the Hiss. So it's like you get a blue card without actually having to pitch it for the Hiss.
Yeah, you're just asking a lot from your tunic.
Yeah, exactly.
Deck is how it feels. And you still had to keep, 3 cards to do that play?
Yeah, exactly. You're keeping 3 cards to do, like, actually 4 damage. So.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, new is, like, anti-math. The deck is completely anti-math.
Yeah.
And
the whole set is anti-math, right? Like, Illusionist is fake math. You have, like, super tiny math. You have Crouching Tiger really attacked for 0. all the math is an illusion.
It's just like new feels weird because like it feels bad to not block with the cards. Like to just be like, well, I need 3 cards for this hand to function so that I can deal 6 damage.
Yeah.
No blocks. Like it's just like, you know how hard that is to do? Like
yeah.
It's like so hard. That's why, like, I don't know, maybe you're just stalling and banishing and you're trying to just take one big turn at the end of the game or something, right? Like, I don't know. Deck's hard. And you and I both were just up super late last night. Just like, I'm just going through every blue in the game. Like, there's gotta be some good blues in the world. And it's like, no,
I was doing the same.
Not.
So I was like, it's gotta be Flock. Surely it's Flock.
And I was like, can I play all red cards and only blue pumps? And then can I play only blue cards with all red pumps? And like, none of this works.
Yeah. I do think one of the all-stars, by the way, you talked about Flock, is like the levels of enlightenment, the other like 1 for 3.
Yeah.
That card is just like a very, very strong card. I don't know.
That is also a trap card, though.
Oh, I don't think it's a trap at all.
I mean,
how's it trap?
Don't play it against new, yeah?
Don't play it against new, sure. But like...
That's the trap.
Yeah, but that's only like... Even if new is super highly represented, it's like 15% of the meta. I don't know. The other 85%, I'm like super happy I have this card.
Oh, no, agreed. I'm just saying don't fall for it. Like, decide those 3 blues out.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. Next question here from Robo. It says, thoughts on Supercell and the Evo Arcane Barrier pieces. And someone's got to remind me of Supercell. Is that the one that the one that came out that deals 20 damage if you pitch?
No, it's the Max card. We have a Max expert on the pod, so
yeah.
Dan, take it away.
Supercell is pretty sick. Yeah, it's like it's X cost, and it says target X hyperdrivers you control, add X. What are the counters? X counters to them, and then create a hyperdriver with X steam counters. The card's kind of nuts. I don't think it changes too much about like what the deck's good against, but I think it's just like converts one of your blues to this like semi power card now. It enables you like if you draw it early, you can get to 3 hyperdrivers a turn quicker because this thing makes a driver, right? Like
the only problem is like you have to have 2 in order to make like the third.
Yeah, but that's your second turn of the game. Like you always have a hyperdriver.
Yeah, assuming the first turn, like you play it, you don't crank, and the second one, you also play don't crank, and then you start your third turn with 2.
Like if you're playing Max, you forever have 1 hyperdriver. Mm-hmm. You always have one that starts on 2, and you always reset and make sure you have 1. So it's like, as soon as you draw that card, you can just keep 3 cards and go boost, make a driver, X equals 2, because you get resources from the first driver, and you have the chest to make another resource. Like it plays really well. So you can like turbo a little bit. You do have to take damage to do that, but if it just means now when you draw the suit early against aggro, like they have 1 less turn where you'd like take all of their damage, which is nice. And then maybe it helps enough against the slow decks. I've only played like 3 games, but when you have 3 hyperdrivers, it also if X equals 3 or more, you shuffle the mech suit back into your deck from banish.
Yeah.
So like if you have 3, I think you can just like block and play this, and now you have 3 hyperdrivers with 6 counter, or like you probably have like 5, 4, 5, 4, 4, and then a fresh one with 3. So now you have like 4 turns where you can just like start blasting again, and maybe get to like 6 drivers. Like I don't know, it seems good.
One thing I like too is that you can still crank the one that you play off this, right? So even though the card itself doesn't have go again, you can still like get your third driver off of this and then play the mech right after.
I was going to say, Dan, you kind of alluded to it. It fixed that problem that Max had where he got all his drivers up, but they were all on 1. Correct. And then now you're just sitting here like, do I play the game still, or do I just sit here for mech suit for the rest of the game? And you're just like in the indecision. But this, like, if you when you draw this, like you're block, and then you draw this, you're like, ooh, slam it, fill everything up, and then you're like, now you got to worry about me attacking you. And your attacks are good because you're still playing mech stuff, but now you actually get to play the game back with them. So you don't just like tank all of your health down waiting for mech suit. Now we have a local,
like maybe Moonshot's a real card. We'll see.
Yep. I have a local who plays a lot of Max, and like that's just like been a thing that I've noticed sometimes is that he just like is he's just in mech suit waiting zone.
Oh yeah, no, it's the worst.
And anytime he gets like extra counters on hyper drivers and he could attack back at me, I'm like, this is annoying because you still have mech suit, but now if I block, you get a whole grip again to like potentially throw at me. And so like this gets you into that situation where like it feels bad to block them because you know you have to push them down before they get to mech suit. But now they can still throw back at you. So I think it does a lot for Max.
Yep. I think it also does help improve matchup a lot, I think, if they're playing I guess if you're going to play around the item destruction, it makes it so much easier to have more than 3 drivers when you build the suit.
Mm-hmm.
Or it lets you boost before you play the suit because you'll have all these counters on your drivers. So I think it's actually way easier to combo on the turn that you build the suit now.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, also you can have easily more than 3 drivers, so you can like get even more attacks into matchups where maybe they could like block out a big turn, right?
Yeah, it's just a good card. At blue, like it's pretty nuts. Like compare this to like a red hyper driver. This card's so much better.
Yeah, they clearly thought it was good enough to where it should only block 2 compared to the other expansion slot blues. So,
yep. And then for the Evo arcane pieces, I mean, he needed it. Teklo definitely needed these, and some of their effects are pretty good. I'm just not sure if this changes any of the matchups for him. Like, it might let him play against, like, Viserai or some other deck like that now that he can actually play it and then do the suit stuff without having to jump through as many hoops. But, like, it doesn't really change the matchups that he has problems with into Arcane. You know, like, Kano.
Yeah, you still have to, like, draw these cards, right?
Yeah.
It's not different than a Rustic Relic in that, like, you still have to find it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, like, in theory, the hat lets you play boost cards again, but I'm not sure how real that is.
Yeah, and you do get some cheese potential with the arms, where like you can play them at instant speed into like Prism and pop an Angel, I guess, right? When it's equipped, deal 1 damage to any target. If you like, do it at face.
Okay. Next from Cusco asks, if not already discussed in the main pod, what are your thoughts on the concession changes? Seems very unnecessary and too much gray area for still IMO.
I think from their perspective, it's hard, right? And it makes sense. Like, they built this system where the heroes that are legal to play are determined by games of Flesh and Blood 1. So, like, they have to enforce something like this, right? That says, like, we need a legitimate winner at events that hand out LL points. So, like, I understand that perspective, but yeah, I don't know. I wish they would just tell us, like, more clearly, like, this is what you can do, this is what you can't.
I mean, they're trying to solve a problem that they created. So this is all self-inflicted. Like, it's just dumb. Like, the ruling's dumb. The way it's set up is dumb. And the reason all of this happens is because you don't let us pass down the invite properly at ProQuests. And this is where it happens. For most players, their interaction with conceding is at the ProQuest RTN level. And their interaction is that people are forcing, concedes to people to get them an invite. Or maybe even they have to trade their the gold foil for the invite to get the concede or something. But this is all because of how the system works. And getting an invite to Pro Tour is very hard to do. You have to win a ProQuest to do it or have a PTI. And if you've started in the game in the last year and a half, getting a PTI is much harder than it used to be. That's just how it is. Or you have to have high elo, and having high elo is also very difficult. It means
if you haven't been to a Pro Tour, it's kind of hard to get high elo.
You probably have to top 8 like a couple callings or something to do that at this point, or maybe one can still get you top 75. I believe it probably should. But that stuff's hard to do, right? So like for new players, it's really hard to qualify for Pro Tour. And so like if you go to a room and a bunch of people already have it and they're fine with being like, I want the gold foil, you want the invite, this is something that we're both happy with, trying to put like restrictions around it, because for some reason that makes LSS feel bad when that happens. We're just going to like, it's still just going to happen. Like, this doesn't actually solve any of the problems. All you do now is you just sit down at the top 2 and you go, hey, would you like to restructure pricing? And they say yes. And you say, okay, second place gets the gold foil. first place gets the invite because you can't move the invite. The invite has to go to the winner, and it doesn't really pass down. And then you play the game, and the person who wants to get second goes, no blocks, no blocks, no blocks, no block. It makes the game look like a joke, and it makes the tournament look like a joke when you do it this way, instead of just letting people concede.
Yeah, I don't think disallowing concessions is ever a good thing. There's just
Can
like
you
so many
imagine
issues with that, right?
on stream if like this ended up happening? Because it's not illegal to say no blocks. Like,
I've done it.
Yeah,
I did it
they're
on
not
stream.
forcing you to be smart.
even if it's blatant, like even if you're just like, you sit down, you draw your hand, you go, no blocks, no blocks. And then you go to your turn and you go Arsenal pass. And then you just don't do anything the whole game. Like, this isn't against the rules. There's almost no way to construct rules in which that would be against the rules. Because if you did, the rules would be really bad. It's just like, why not just let people concede? It's like not that big of a deal. I know what they're trying to protect against, which is coercion conceding, which is a problem in other card games. I actually feel like someone in LSS had this problem in a game that they played because they're like really hard stance against this, which makes
also
sense.
the LL system, right? Like it directly impacts the legitimacy of the system.
They change the system every 2 months anyway, so the system isn't legitimate. And
but from their perspective, like they have to try and protect it, right?
The system hasn't changed in terms of
change it again.
It's still always the winner gets the points. If they change it to where it was like first and second place, for example, that could be like a solution.
Sure,
but as long as the system, yeah.
I still think this is LL points related. Like, I don't think these changes have any consideration for LL points. I mean, if they were concerned about that, they wouldn't keep changing how much everything was worth to keep heroes around because they're LLing too fast. Like, right before it happens. Like, that's fine. They could do whatever they want there. It's not a big deal. I'm just saying, like, I don't think that the concession stuff has anything to do with LL points.
I think it might.
That'd be really weird if that was part of it. To me, it just seems like they don't want people pressuring someone else into conceding because that feels bad.
Yeah.
And I 100%
that part I understood. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't like any of that. Like, and they're, trying not to have people get like paid off. Like, these things happen in other card games. And it feels like someone in LSS or multiple people in LSS have had this experience in other card games and they're really trying to protect against it. And that I give them a lot of credit for. I think that is smart. That makes perfect sense to me why they don't want that type of environment in the game. And in that environment in the game is not enjoyable. Then having to question how people topped or how many people they paid off or what they said, none of that's enjoyable. And you don't want the person who's sitting there in time pressure at there against someone who, maybe they look up to or they know or whatever, feel like they're getting pressured into having to concede and then like later feeling bad about it. Like, stuff like that never feels good. And so I understand trying to protect against that. But you can protect against that and then just give us a way to like prize split. Just let us prize split. That's all we care about. Is like, prize splitting has been everything in card games since the beginning. It happens in poker. It happens in everything that has prizes. Prize splitting is just like a natural part of a tournament process for the most part. And like, being so anti-prize splitting to try and protect from being like a forced concession just feels weird to me. So, yes, that's how I feel about the concession stuff. But none of this would be fine if you could just pass down the invite, right? I would prefer to play the finals and see who wins if I could just give the invite to someone else, right? Like, if I could make the invite for second place and the gold foil for first place, and then we actually play the game, would be nice as well, right? It's something. Just let me just be like, hey, you get the invite. Let's play for the gold.
Yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as like in Gem, you just like opt out of invite. Like, why can't they just make that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they should get rid of gold foils, but they can also make the first and second prizing equal and just play for the invite, right?
Sure. It's just like, it's super top heavy at ProQuest. Like, you either go to a ProQuest, and we're very lucky in our area. We have a lot of store credit, so it's still worth it to top. I will say we're very lucky in that aspect. I know a lot of areas don't have that. But for a lot of people, you go there, and if you get second place, you just wasted your whole day. Like, you just got there, and then you got like, at least this time you got a mat, so you got something out of it. But in the past, you would just be like, get second place, your opponent's holding a gold foil and the invite, and you like, thanks for my box of sleeves, and then you go home. And you're like, why did I get second place and spend 10 hours doing this? Like there's just no prizing. Luckily, we don't really experience that as much in this area, because usually you're like walking away with like $200 store credit or something, and it still feels good. But I can understand that, like, it's like, why not just oh, you want the invite? I want this. Okay, we both got something cool. Like we're good. Okay. Next topic here. Bo Ferkel asks, you've talked about how there are still advancements in Fab theory to come. What parts of the game are ripe for advancement? Is it deck building? Is it play? Or is it both? I think this comes off the back of the podcast and other people. It was a fun topic saying that people at Fab aren't actually good, and that like in X amount of years, people will look back and be like, we weren't very good during that era yet. So, what areas do you think are probably really need people to improve in, or are kind of weak for top play?
Yeah, I think people just make too many like calls based on their heuristic that they've practiced beforehand. And this isn't like a knock on like having okay, this is my game plan in the matchup, here's what I'm going to do. That's like something you should have in order to get to like 90% competence, but that last 10% is like being able to identify when it's proper to abandon your game plan because of what's happening in the game is something I think not enough people do. It's kind of hard even now to describe it tangibly, but
it's playing to win versus playing like what is the best overall.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes, like for example, it came up yesterday when I was playing against, I was testing into Fino, and I was playing new into Kasai, I think it was, and he was winning like 30 to like 7, something egregious. And there was a turn where I presented a hit trigger that would have potentially gained me like 4 points of value in terms of damage if he doesn't block. So like his card would have been blocking for 7. But we're both at like 20-ish cards in deck. And so I think like the better play in that game state is just to recognize like, okay, I need to abandon my game plan of like playing for make the game go long, get more value out of my cards than you because my cards just like do more number. And just say, okay, well, if I end the game, it doesn't like the cards in deck won't matter. Nothing else matters. My life total is so high. I can like make this type of a more greedy play that I wouldn't have made earlier in the game that doesn't align with my heuristic.
Agreed. I will also say I think deck building is like really far behind where it should be for like a Pro Tour or world level event. I think the sideboard switch out and sideboard plans are pretty basic in a lot of cases. And that's even accusing us. I think our Hatchet sideboard could have been a lot better than it was. And the fact that we were just put 62 cards in and then like didn't know what to cut, I think is, and didn't have a good argument for why it should be 62 other than like, I don't know what to cut in some matchups is like pretty amateur level, to be fair. And so like, I think there's a lot of improvement there. I also think if you look down at your deck list and they're all 3-ofs, your deck list probably sucks. It's pretty much like ridiculous not to have 1-ofs or not to have a tuned deck. You can still win with all that to say like, it might not matter. Right. But it's a very, very often very few and far between where having all 3-ofs of everything in your deck is correct. It just like almost never happens.
Yeah.
You're probably not tuning your deck close enough to what it should actually look like.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of coming from like other card games where people just have that notion of like, oh, well, I have to play 3 of this important card because there's a chance I don't draw it throughout the course of the game. But with how Fab is going now, the majority of games are getting to see like at least 2/3 of your deck. So playing those 1-ofs and 2-ofs, like you mentioned, Cody, I think is like so much more rewarding in the course of the game.
Yep. And then like play wise, I think there's a big area of play that there isn't a consensus on how to play it properly. And I can give a good example here. So let's say you're both in like mid-20s. Your opponent's like 28, you're like 24. You look down at your hand and your hand pushes like 25 damage. It's like your big power turn. But your opponent comes in and your opponent is going to come in for some unknown number, but it does look like it's going to be in the 20s for how much damage they're coming in. And then a lot of the cases of this, if you take all of their damage, you'll be at like 8, 5 maybe. It's a little nebulous. And then your opponent will be at 28 and you'll have a hand that pushes like 25 damage, right? And the decision on whether to play your hand or block with your whole hand, I think is something that I see both sides of professional players make completely different decisions on, and no one can agree what the correct answer is here. And this is why they have the momentum or doesn't matter, isn't real, right? Type of thought process. But I see a lot of pro players who will just block their whole hand, even if their hand was strong enough, because they don't want to go down that low or be that low from their opponent. And I'll see other people, and then they'll just be like, I'm just going to try and fight again on a different turn, right? And then I'll also just see people like, I'm going to take it and push back at you, and then then we're going to play both at low health. And there's positives and negatives. One, you could push your whole hand to them, and they could block with no cards, come back, and now you're like at 8, and it's like pretty hard to play out of that. But maybe you can block with like 2 cards or 3 cards, and then like throw something back, and now they're in the blocking cycle, and you're going to go down that road. Or you could just be like, no, that damage is too high. I'm going to block with my whole hand. I'm going to try again later. But then you never get to try again later because they just have, all the pressure in the game. And so after that point, and then you just slowly get whittled down. And then when you get the good hand again, you're at like 15 and you can't take the whole turn. Like you can never hold the 4-card hand for the rest of the game. And like, then you just lose out and you're just like, I just slowly bled out and all I did was block for the last 7 rounds. And so maybe I should have held that, but there's like no consensus on what the right answer here is. Obviously there's a lot of context on what deck you're playing, what deck they're playing, how likely are these things to happen. But I have seen that this seems to be the big area that like, this is unsolved. How to play this game properly in that area is completely unsolved. And people are just doing what they feel more comfortable doing, whether that's like, no, I'm going to battle back, or no, I'm just going to give you my whole hand. So if you're listening at home, I think that is like a big area to think about when you're in those type of game states, and just know that like you're not alone because no one knows the correct answer to that question yet.
Yep.
Okay. Last question here is the Jester, and it asks, how much do you factor in results from lower level events like Battle Hardens as being indicative of the state of the larger meta, especially regarding representation of different decks with the meta? So how often do you look at Battle Hardens and try and use that to see what the meta looks like?
Say like very little, but I definitely pay attention to it, right? Like, I don't know. Like, any information is information, but I'm not putting too much merit into Battle Harden results typically.
Usually my biggest takeaway from Battle Harden results, because those are usually the ones where deck lists are posted after, is the next time I face an opponent on that particular hero, I at least consider back the most recent winning deck list, or maybe it was like off meta hero that got top 8, something like this, where it's more likely to be inspired by this person who had a good result. So I usually factor in like the tech choices and style of deck more so than like, oh, Azalea won this event, now I'll expect these people who have never played Azalea before to all start play Azalea now. I don't usually make those kind of conclusions, but I do usually infer based on tech cards for what people will be playing who are playing the hero that recently did well.
I agree with that. It's hard to count Battle Harden results when you're just going to see Brody playing Azalea in the top 8 anyway. And it's just like, there's not that many Azaleas still.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like, it just like depends where it is, depends how many people, depends at what point of the meta it's in, whether, how serious it might be. But for the most part, Battle Hardens are just like super pro quests to me. They don't get the same level of travel as like a calling does. The rounds are pretty punishing for how you can top 8 at them, depending on how many people show up. And then I think multiple people's paths to top 8 are very, very widely different from each other. When you go to like a pro tour, for example, while you do have obviously draft and stuff in that, just looking just at CC, most of those games were played at a pretty good level. But you could easily just go to a Battle Harden and like your first 4 opponents are just like people who are at their Battle Harden for like not, they haven't played very long. And then also you could sit down and just play like Brody into Fang into like, because I've done both at Battle Hardens. I showed up and they're like, people are new. And I'm just like, that's cool. Battle Hardens are a great place to go if you're a new player to try and get into competitive. So like, this makes perfect sense. But then like you see that for like the first 3 or 4 rounds, and you're like, okay, I guess I'm topping. Like, and then like at the same time, I just sat down, and then I'm just like, hey Dan, we traveled here together. Let's play. And then like you go over and you're like, oh, I'm gonna play Naive next, and then you're like, Nathan Crawford's next. Okay, this is a completely different event. Like my experience here was way different than everyone else's, and so like it's pretty hard at like a Battle Hardened to look at, you know, kind of how the meta was supposed to shape out, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else?
Nope. I gotta water my plant.
You gotta water your plant. I gotta go play some Enigma. So goodbye. See ya.